They danced until their feet bled. They danced until their legs gave out. They danced until they died. This isn't the plot of a horror movie. It's a real event, recorded by multiple witnesses, priests, doctors, even the local government. In the summer of 1518, a woman stepped into the streets of Strasbourg, in what is now modern-day France. She started to dance, not with joy, not with music, but with a look of terror in her eyes. Within days, dozens joined her, then hundreds. They screamed, they convulsed. They begged for it to stop, but they couldn't. This was no party. This was the beginning of one of the most disturbing forgotten plagues in human history. And what makes it even more terrifying is that no one knows why it happened, and it wasn't the first time. This event is known today, the Dancing Plague of 1518, but that name barely captures the chaos that swept through the streets of Strasbourg for almost a full month. Eyewitness accounts say people danced without rest for days, not just out of control, but in agony. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Others broke their ribs, cracked their skulls, or dropped dead from heart attacks and strokes. And yet the dancing continued. No music, no rhythm, no explanation, just a wave of movement, spreading from person to person like a virus. But what kind of illness makes you dance until death? As the crisis deepened, authorities scrambled for answers. Local physicians ruled out supernatural causes. Instead, they diagnosed what they called hot blood, an overheating of the body and brain caused by intense fever, bad food, or even divine punishment. So, what did the government do? They did the worst thing possible. They built a stage, hired musicians, and told the dancers to keep going. They believed the only cure was to dance the sickness out. So, hundreds of suffering people were forced into choreographed torment, playing violins and drums as people wept and screamed and fell to their knees, and the death toll climbed. Here's the chilling part. Strasbourg wasn't the first. In the year 1374, over a century earlier, a similar outbreak hit Aachen, now in Germany, where entire groups of people reportedly leapt and twisted through the streets, hallucinating, shouting about demons, and collapsing in droves. Other accounts suggest dancing epidemics hit the Netherlands, Belgium, and parts of France in the 15th century. But the 1518 event in Strasbourg was the most well-documented and the deadliest. Imagine watching a friend or neighbor suddenly break into convulsions, flailing with blank eyes and screaming, only to see others join in, like some kind of contagious madness. What were they seeing? What were they feeling? Or what were they running from? Today, scientists and historians still don't agree on what caused the dancing plague, but here are the main theories. 1. Ergot poisoning, a type of mold that grows on damp rye bread. It produces chemicals similar to LSD. Some believe mass poisoning caused hallucinations and uncontrolled movements, but ergot poisoning usually causes convulsions, not rhythmic dancing, and it rarely spreads socially like this. 2. Mass psychogenic illness, mass hysteria, a psychological response to stress and trauma, especially in tight-knit, religious communities. Strasbourg had just endured famine, disease, and violent repression. Fear, starvation, and trauma can do strange things to the human mind. Perhaps the dancers were expressing a shared emotional breakdown, one that spread like wildfire. 3. Religious possession. In medieval Europe, people believed in Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancing and nervous disorders. Many believed the plague was a punishment from God or Saint Vitus himself. That belief may have caused the symptoms in deeply religious people. The idea, if you thought you might dance to death, your body might just do it. So, what was it? A drug, a trauma response, a divine punishment, or something far more disturbing? But none of the theories fully explain why it happened, or how it spread so quickly from person to person with such violent intensity. What happened next in Strasbourg turned a bizarre event into a full-scale social catastrophe as more bodies collapsed from exhaustion, heart failure, or injury. City leaders tried anything to stop the madness. In desperation, they ordered the construction of a wooden stage in the city square and brought in professional musicians, believing that if this was indeed a case of overheated blood or divine punishment, forcing the dancers to continue might burn the sickness out. The result was chaos. Survivors described the music making things worse. The rhythm gave the plague a tempo, the drums gave it structure, and the dancers, already writhing in pain, were now performing as if in some cursed ritual. But it wasn't just music. Others were led to religious shrines outside the city too, beg forgiveness from Saint Vitus, hoping spiritual pilgrimage would cure their limbs. Some were locked up in dark rooms with no sound. Others were given herbal remedies or bled by medieval physicians. None of it worked. In fact, reports suggest that the treatment methods might have increased the psychological panic, deepening the belief that the plague was supernatural or unstoppable. And while the city suffered through this strange epidemic, the truth is that many of those afflicted were already among the most vulnerable women, the poor, and those who had recently suffered famine, sickness, or loss. This tells us something vital. The dancing plague wasn't just a mystery of biology, it was a reflection of mass trauma. Strasbourg at the time was a pressure cooker of stress. Floods had destroyed crops, starvation was rampant, and the church was more feared than loved. People lived in constant fear of hell, curses, and divine punishment. Imagine waking up every day knowing that you might lose your family to disease, your home to nature, and your soul to a sin you didn't understand. Is it really so surprising that one woman, in the heat of July, under all that pressure, snapped into motion? And is it so impossible to believe that others, seeing her uncontrollable state, followed, unconsciously drawn into the shared illusion of despair and ecstasy? But here's the chilling part. While the world has changed, the mechanisms behind events like this may not have. Today, we witness psychological contagion all the time, though in different forms. Mass panic on social media, waves of fainting spells in schools, TikTok-driven illnesses where teens mimic disorders unconsciously, and cases of viral hysteria that spread through nothing but screens and suggestion. In 2020, dozens of young people began experiencing identical tics and spasms after watching popular creators with Tourette's syndrome on TikTok. Psychologists eventually labeled it a modern form of mass psychogenic illness, proving that belief and exposure alone could spark real, physical symptoms. It wasn't deception. It wasn't faking. It was the human brain responding to extreme suggestion. Just like Strasbourg. Now imagine if that suggestion was fear. What if tomorrow's headlines declared a new mystery illness? What if people began fainting in malls, shaking in schools, twitching in workplaces? What if the cameras turned on, and millions watched, and copied, and believed? Could we be any more prepared than they were in 1518? We like to believe we are rational creatures, that science, logic, and data protect us from medieval-style hysteria. But history shows us again and again, under the right conditions, fear can become contagious. Behavior can spiral. Entire communities can fall into shared delusion and suffer. The consequences. What happened in Strasbourg wasn't magic, and it wasn't madness. It was the raw exposure of the human psyche, stripped of its comforts and pushed to its edge. And just because we carry smartphones instead of rosary beads doesn't mean we're immune. The next dancing plague might not look like flailing limbs. It might look like a panic spread by headlines, or a trend that turns deadly, or a wave of behavior no one understands until it's far too late. So, the question is no longer what happened to them. The question is, what would you do? If everyone around you was falling into it dancing, twitching, panicking, would you join them? Would you try to help? Or would you stand still, unsure if what you're witnessing is real? In the end, the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of the most unsettling chapters in human history. Not because it's unsolved, but because it reminds us that the real plague may not be disease at all. It may be fear, and fear, when shared, is powerful enough to move entire cities. It can take rational people and pull them into something darker, something contagious, something we might not recognize until we're already dancing too. If this story made your heart race or your mind wander, you're not alone. History is full of moments like this, moments that shake our sense of reality and force us to ask deeper questions. So, if you felt something tonight, I invite you to stay curious with us. Subscribe to Past and Peace and join a community that doesn't just learn history, we feel it. Tell us in the comments, what do you think caused the dancing plague? And more importantly, could it happen again? One story ends, another begins.